4 reasons for thinking the whore of Babylon is not the Catholic Church or the Roman Empire, but rather the city of Jerusalem. Reason number 1. This is the most important. John tells you that the whore is Jerusalem. Is that a good reason? Let me say it again. Reason number 1. John tells you that the whore of Babylon is Jerusalem. If you read the book in context and you look at the way John uses imagery, he's the same in the Apocalypse as he is in the Gospel. Whenever he takes any word or any phrase like hour or woman, right, or son of man, or any phrase like that, spirit, flesh, and it runs throughout the book, it's a kind of a theme or a motif that he builds upon. He'll start with an initial meaning and then develop the meaning throughout the book. Well, if you look, John tells you, number 1, in Revelation 17, at the end of the vision, the angel says to John, quote, the woman that you saw is what? The great city. That's who she is. She's the great city which has dominion over the kings of the earth. Revelation 17:18. Now, when is the first time John uses this phrase, the great city? It's in an extended vision of Jerusalem in Revelation 11. Come with me to Revelation 11 for just a minute. Point 2 here. I've given you the quote. This is when John is sent out to measure the city of Jerusalem. And it says this, then I, John, was given a measuring rod like a staff, and I was told, rise and measure the temple of God and the altar and those who worship there. But do not measure the court outside the temple. Leave that out, for it is given over to the nations, and they will trample over the holy city for 42 months. And I will grant my 2 witnesses power to prophesy for 1,260 days. And when they have finished their testimony, the beast that ascends from the bottomless pit will make war upon them and kill them. And their dead bodies will lie in the street of what? The great city. Now, get ready. What is the great city? Which is allegorically called Sodom and Egypt, where their Lord was crucified. Highlight that. So the beast is going to make war on the city called the great city, which is allegorically called Sodom and Egypt, where their Lord was crucified. Now, modern scholars who take the Roman interpretation are absolutely baffled by this verse. Some of them suggested that it got added later. It's like an interpolation, because everybody knows that Jesus was not crucified in Rome, was he? He was crucified in Jerusalem. And so John here is cluing you into the fact that the great city, which he identifies as the whore, is Jerusalem, where their Lord was crucified. And notice the spiritual interpretation of Jerusalem that he's giving. He says that Jerusalem, this great city, is allegorically called Sodom and Egypt. Now, if you were a first century Jew, what would it mean for John to tell you that Jerusalem's real name is Sodom? If you know your Old Testament, it tells you a lot. There are a lot of cities in the United States that are named after, like biblical towns. Like you've probably seen on different maps, the town of Smyrna or something like that. Cities from the book of Revelation or from the Bible. Ever been to a town named Sodom? It's like trying to find a Catholic kid named Judas. No, there are Michaels running around everywhere. Mary's running around everywhere. Nobody names their kid Judas. Hope not. You never know these days, though, huh? Why not? Well, because it's like a symbol of evil, right? So John here is saying that Jerusalem is actually allegorically Sodom. So what does that mean? Jerusalem in the first century has become corrupt. It's become wicked. It's become evil. It's like Sodom. And then again, he says allegorically Jerusalem is called Egypt, right? What does Egypt represent for a Jew? Servitude, slavery, right? Think about the Exodus from Egypt. The Egyptians were the kind of paradigmatic persecutors of God's people. What did the Pharaoh of Egypt do to the Jews and to their children? He wanted to slaughter all the babies. Because the spirit behind Pharaoh was the same spirit doing it today, isn't it? Culture of death, kingdom of death, the kingdom of Satan. And so John here is tying things to Jerusalem. We usually think of Jerusalem as the holy city, but John's saying, no. In the first century AD, Jerusalem had become wicked. It had become evil. that's why the Lord met his death there. The Messiah came, and what did they do? They crucified him, right? So there's a spiritual dimension that John wants you to see, and he's linking Jerusalem to the great city and then linking the great city to the whore. Okay, so that's the first point. John tells you that the great city is Jerusalem. Now you might say, well, hold on, Dr. Pitre. He says the great city that has dominion over the kings of the earth. I mean, Jerusalem doesn't have dominion over the kings of the earth, does it? Well, maybe not political dominion. But if you look at the book of Ezekiel, or if you look at the Psalms, like Psalm 89, about David, who is the Lord of lords and King of kings in the book of Psalms? The Davidic king, the son of David. Jerusalem is, in Ezekiel, the navel of the world. It's the city to which all other cities are supposed to be subservient. Remember when Solomon was reigning and all the Gentiles are coming to hear the wisdom of Solomon? That was God's plan, that Jerusalem would become the center of the earth, and that all the nations would pilgrimage to Jerusalem to worship in the heavenly temple. So it has a spiritual dominion and a spiritual authority over the world. That's its rightful place. Do you realize that? The same is true, I can't get into the whole theology of this, about our Holy Father as well. Who's the one man who has authority to speak to the whole world? And even in our day, the world recognizes it, don't they? They recognize that when the Pope speaks, he speaks for what? The whole world. And he wears that triple crown of priest, prophet, and king. You know who used to wear it before him? The high priest in Jerusalem. Josephus tells us that the high priest wore a triple crown when he would offer this liturgy, when he would celebrate the liturgy. And by the first century, the high priests had gotten so proud of it, their hats got taller and taller. And Josephus says that one of the high priests in the first century, his, what we would call a mitre, actually, Josephus calls it a mitre in Greek, was 6 feet high. Now, you think our bishop's hats are big. You ain't seen nothing like this. That's like a 46-gallon hat. I mean, this is huge, okay? So the high priest was recognized that even though Rome was in control, he still was the rightful spiritual head of the world, as was the Davidic king. So anyway, John's telling you that the great city is Jerusalem. Let's keep going. I'm sorry, I'm getting behind you.